Hello there, everybody. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we're continuing with the My Thoughts on My Team series, and here to break down the Philadelphia Eagles is Josh Hudson. Josh, thanks for joining me. How's it going?
That's going well, Aaron. How you doing this morning?
I've been better. I've been injured and sick. I can't even sit. I pulled something in my leg yesterday playing baseball, and I'm having a hard time. If you see me moving like this in my chair, it's because my left leg is going numb, and it hurts to even sit. I literally had to sleep on my side.
Oh, we got to get you one of those inflatable donuts for the people.
Oh, hemorrhoid donut. Awesome. Thanks. Great. I'm creeping towards 40 as if I wasn't feeling old enough as it was. Thanks. Now I have to go get a hemorrhoid donut.
Well, maybe this is your sign to stop playing baseball at almost 40 years old.
Oh, no, it's not that I'm playing baseball at 39 years old. It's that I play it like a psycho, like I'm still 20. Diving and sliding.
Well, given the mad science label, yeah, it makes sense. I would expect nothing less out of you.
Yeah, running through the outfield fence, turning singles into triples. Oh, yeah, I play like a – it's a problem, though. Hockey, baseball, football, soccer. When I grew up, it was always travel. I never played house leagues. I only know how to play at one speed. If I played baseball –
That's why I stopped playing a long time ago.
Well, then that's the problem for me. All throughout, whether it be college ball, high school ball, whatever it was, you don't hustle. It's get the hell off the field. You know, it was the coach would yell at you for not hustling. So now to be out there playing rec league softball, it's programmed into my brain to hustle. And then it's like, oh, wait, we're up 35 runs in a co-ed softball league. I could probably tone it down now, but it's in your brain, man. They get that hustle shit into your head and you don't know how to stop.
That they do.
I had times last year. I had one where I think I had a sprained ankle or something. And I didn't even know if I could bat. I swung, hit the ball into the outfield. I was like, I'm going to limp to first base and get an injury runner. The second that ball hit, I'm rounding and going to second. The adrenaline takes over, and I become the mad scientist, a total fucking psycho. But enough about me. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find you at?
Well, I'll tell you what. You can start just by going and following Club Fantasy FFL. It's a site that I run with a lot of great people. Ryan Weiss, Joe Zolo, Faith Enos with our Women of Fantasy brand, Kelly Singh, a whole 9 yards. There's a whole lot of people that contribute, but it's at Club Fantasy FFL on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The website's at clubfantasyffl.com. If you really want to follow me, you can. It's at the one Hudsonian. That's the number one. I'm really just a fantasy football cheerleader. I just like sharing my friends' work and all the hard work that a lot of the great content creators like yourself, Aaron, put out.
There you go. See, I should have come to you. I was trying to start this off. I wanted to kick off the series with like a women's week, and I didn't. I found it so hard. I think I only knew maybe 10 women in the industry, and some of them were so hard to get a hold of. I think in the end I had 3 out of 32 teams. I think I found 3 who were actually female. I was hoping to get a whole 7, but it just, I couldn't find anyone. And then the people I did find, they were either too busy or they don't reply because it's a busy time of year. But
yeah, absolutely.
In the end, I think I ended up getting Jen Akins, Jill Bajol. I got one other, but I can't remember who it is. But
Jen's fantastic. We've had her on a couple of our shows. She was on our Women of Fantasy Football event show last year. Absolutely love her. She's fantastic.
I had never met her actually until that podcast.
She does a lot of really good work with 4for4.
Yeah, see, that's when I've got lots of sites from when I played or like was just a player that I went to, and I never really knew 4for4. It's not really somewhere I ever dive in. My typical go-tos are DLF, Fantasy Pros, or Player Profiler, so
makes sense.
That's where I find my work. But all right, let's get right into it now. Now that I've spent 8 minutes talking about myself. Oh, it's only 4. All right, the Philadelphia Eagles. We have a pretty easy quarterback room to decipher. All-world quarterback Jalen Hurts, who's the consensus QB3, it looks like. And the backup is journeyman Marcus Mariota and freshly drafted rookie Tanner McKee. I assume Mariota and McKee I guess I will see some action, even if they're not injured. Inevitably, there's going to be a game where the Eagles are going to be benching their starters come halftime, and they're going to see some run. But what are your overall thoughts on this room, and more specifically Jalen Hurts?
Well, I like Tanner McKee just as a developmental guy. I mean, Philly's always been known to invest very heavily in the quarterback position. I mean, we saw it from, Donovan McNabb to drafting Kevin Cobb to then drafting Nick Foles. When they traded all the way up to get Carson Wentz right after signing him to the big contract, they spent a second round pick on Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Developing quarterbacks is just something that has stuck with this team ever since the Andy Reid era, and it has outlasted Reid's time in Philadelphia. It's something that Jeffrey Lurie and both Howie Roseman and the GM, they swear by and they stand by because, I mean, you saw it last year. I think there were 65 different quarterbacks that started an NFL game last year. There are 32 teams.
Yeah.
There were some teams that went through 4 different quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So
actually, I think there's a few that went through more. I think it's bad. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just one of those things where you can never truly have enough good quarterbacks. And I think that really goes to really any position, but especially at the quarterback position, because it is arguably the most important position on the field. Mariota, I think at this point in his career, he's a good backup. We saw it with his time with the Raiders. That's ultimately what led to the free agent contract with the Falcons. He has a lot of limitations in his game, but when you look at what he's able to do on the ground as a mobile quarterback, it's a pretty seamless transition to what they already have in their starter, Jalen Hurts. I made sure when you invited me onto this podcast that I went through and I did my first round of projections on the Philadelphia Eagles. And something that I come to do, especially with teams that you expect to be good, I tend to only project the starting quarterback for only 16 games, because there's inevitably going to be a time when, like you said, they're up big. Maybe the starter ends up getting benched for the last quarter and a half, or and I shouldn't say benched, I should say taken out for precautionary regions. That kind of has a negative connotation, but they always end up, maybe sitting that last game because they already have the 1 seed locked up, or
they're up
they already have their
on the
playoff
Lions
seeding
at halftime.
Yeah, exactly. So, I projected Mariota to at least play 1 game. But yeah, my projections with Jalen Hurts right now, I have him scoring about 420 fantasy points. Now, the way that I do my projections, I do 6 points per passing touchdown.
Yeah, me too.
That's just a personal philosophy. I've never understood why you only give 4 points for a touchdown. Touchdowns count for 6 points. That's pretty standard. I don't understand why we have to hold that, but regardless. But I have him taking a bit of a small jump just in the passing volume. That the switch in offensive coordinator, I think a lot of people just in general, when they do projections, they'll just look at the last year and it's like, all right, yeah, they're going to duplicate that. I don't see that as ever being true, ever. Even with some of the best quarterbacks, anytime there's an adjustment, whether it's going from one offensive coordinator to another, a la Kansas City this year, going from Bieniemy last year to Matt Nagy, there's going to be some small shift, even though Andy Reid is the one that calls the plays. It'll be the same thing in Philadelphia, going from Shane Steichen, who was calling the plays, to Brian Johnson, who was the quarterback's coach last year, but has never called plays. So I think at the end of the day, in the beginning of the season, as he's sort of getting his feet wet as a play caller, you might end up seeing a lot more runs in this offense. And then it'll be, all right, we got to scramble. We got to throw the football a ton because of X, Y, and Z happening. So I think that the way that I adjusted the split, so to speak, I have the Eagles at about 561 total pass attempts and only 500 rush attempts, which is a far cry from what they did last year, where they were a little bit more run heavy based on what I projected this year.
All right, moving on to a running back room that has suddenly become kind of crowded. You move Miles Sanders out. They bring in DeAndre Swift to go with Rashad Penny, Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott. This is kind of a mess. I know Swift has shot up in ADP since moving here, and everyone's assuming Penny is going to miss time because he's probably going to miss time at some point. I think this is going to be a glorified committee backfield here, and I don't know if we're going to get a single usable, reliable fantasy asset here. What do you think of these 4?
Well, keep in mind, fantasy is a week-to-week game. So even if, Penny only plays 7 games, there's a chance that he's a top 5 running back in those 7 games because he's that good and he's that efficient. And that's the one thing that I love about this pairing of DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. When you look at just the two of them historically, DeAndre Swift, I believe, averages right around 4.7 yards per carry, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And Rashad Penny is around like 5. Last year on Seattle, with a makeshift offensive line that was still getting its feet wet in the early going when Rashad Penny was healthy, he averaged 6.1 yards per carry and had I believe it was the second highest yards before contact per attempt. Like, he finds a hole and goes. Well, now you put him on a Philadelphia Eagles team that has arguably the best offensive line in football, where there's only one position that's unsettled, and they knew going into the season that it would be that because Isaac Samalu left and signed with the Steelers. So they're adding now, they're going to have a competition between 3rd-round pick Tyler Steen out of Alabama and 2nd-round pick from the 2022 draft, Cam Jurgens, who truly I think should stay at center and just be the backup heir apparent to Jason Kelsey. Another discussion for another day. But when you pair in Penny and Swift, you have two guys that are immensely efficient. These guys can very easily, with a running mobile quarterback, can average over 6 yards per touch, not per carry, per touch. And Penny, we know, has never really been a passing down back. It's not somebody that they're throw to. This offense last year with Jalen Hurts starting a full season absolutely plummeted in targets to the running back position. So you add in Swift, which, it's like you instantly want to say, all right, well, they have to throw to running backs now, right? This is ultimately what I think is going to happen. They're not going to throw to running backs. What they're going to do is they're going to utilize Swift as a slot receiver. The slot receiver was a position for the Philadelphia Eagles that struggled mightily last year. Quez Watkins, he went downhill fast in 2022. Fast. So they bring in Olamide Zaccheaus. Now you bring in a running back with the skill set of a receiver like a DeAndre Swift. So I think Swift is still going to see a good amount of targets. I don't think he's going to be at that like 70, 75 that so many people know that he is capable of being if he plays a full season. But in this offense, I think it's very realistic that he could see between 55 and 60 targets just because they will use him as a slot receiver and not running those like little flat routes out of the backfield or the little arrow routes that you see that like guys like Christian McCaffrey tend to run a lot out of the backfield.
I hope so for his sake. That's the only way I think I see him returning on his ADP. Otherwise, he's not a particularly good fit for a team that doesn't dump off. Like Hurts isn't going to dump off. And 3/4 of his production through his career has been on dump offs. Like he's not.
He also does have a nose for the end zone. He does score a lot of touchdowns, which that will be interesting to see how that's utilized here in Philadelphia because Jalen Hurts is so good inside the 5-yard line. Like you don't need a running back because he is that good. So I think I went through and I projected Swift at 8 total touchdowns. I have him at 6 rushing, 2 receiving. And I have Hurts at 10 rushing touchdowns. It's a slight decrease from last year, but again, it's going through and it's understanding, hey, we just paid this guy, 50+ million per year. Let's do what we can to try to keep him healthy. So I think in the early going, they're going to try to make the play calls that say, hey, Jalen, let's not get you beat up a lot. Yeah. Let's utilize these backs. When and if they get hurt, then Jalen Hurts will step in and feel like he probably has to do it alone. It's that Josh Allen syndrome. But as long as Swift and Penny are healthy, I think that Nick Sirianni, I think that Brian Johnson will want to get the running backs the football and take a little bit more pressure off of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah. Now we have the top-loaded wide receiver room. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are roughly top 12s. Quez Watkins and Olamide Zaccheaus, who you spoke about before, and Greg Ward. Is there anything to see here outside of Brown and Smith for you?
A little, and again, it boils down to the talk of the slot wide receiver position. Quez took a big step back, which I think a lot of people, not just in Philadelphia, but as a whole in football, it kind of expected that when you bring in a talent like AJ Brown. But the one thing I found really interesting with this offense in 2022, they targeted only 4 wide receivers on the entire year. And that was largely due to the fact that all of them played 17 games. The only skill position player that truly missed any time of note was Dallas Goedert. He played 12 games. AJ Brown, 17 games. Devonta Smith, 17 games. Quez Watkins, 17 games. Zach Pascal, 17 games. Miles Sanders, 17 games.
Jeez.
They did not miss time last year. So what comes up must come down, right? So, it's that sort of transitive property that I don't think you're going
to balance that out.
And Rashad Penny too, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but AJ Brown has a history of getting nicked up and missing some time here and
there.
It's only a matter of time, right, before Devonta Smith takes the wrong hit and then misses half a season because his BMI is like 12. At least that's what people in the dynasty community have told me.
12.
So, and Dallas Goedert's never played a full season either. So it's only a matter of time before these targets, instead of being hyper-focused to the 3 guys, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert, start sort of making their way to some of these other players. So, I don't mind, the DeAndre Swift investments. Like you said, I do think that the ADP is definitely too high. But if, let's say, A.J. Brown misses 4 games, where are those targets going to go? They're not going to automatically throw to Quez Watkins. I'm telling you that right now. They're going to take the receiving option that is DeAndre Swift. They will move him around in that offense. But what happens if DeAndre Swift gets hurt? Well, now you default to the slot receiver position, and that is Quez Watkins versus Zacchaeus. I think that Watkins will have the leg up at least to start the season because, again, he was the guy they spent the draft pick on. It was a 6th round pick, but they still invested in him. They do believe in him. Just had some major lapses in judgment and drop issues last year. So that's why they wanted to bring in competition. Now, if he feels the heat, then yeah, you'll see Zacchaeus start getting some touches, but I don't think you're really looking at anything more than like best ball territory where it's like maybe 1 or 2 really good games. These targets will be funneled to AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Like the way that I split the target share between these 3, I have AJ Brown at roughly 25%, Devonta Smith roughly 22%, and then Dallas Goedert 15%. And I think that's a pretty fair split, especially judging with how that offense worked and operated last year. And then you throw in someone like DeAndre Swift, who again has that ability, but it really boils down to how do they want to use him, because they will not target the running backs out of the backfield. So I gave Swift about 10%.
Closing it out now with that tight end room that you mentioned, we got Dallas Goedert and Jack Stoll. Goddard's the only one to see here. I think he, if healthy, finishes 4, 5, tight end 4, 5, 6. Somewhere in that range?
If healthy, yeah. I think the big thing with Goedert, you're still looking at more receptions and yards versus touchdowns. I don't think he scored anything more than 5 in a given season. And, much like we talked about previously with Jalen Hurts inside the red zone, he's more willing to just QB sneak it, take it himself on delayed runs, draw plays, etc. Which, and Goedert, for as great as a big play option as he is, doesn't really have a ton of like 20+ yard touchdowns in his career. So, I penciled him in for about 4 receiving touchdowns. I do have him at about 163 fantasy points as a whole. So, you look at that historically, that's probably going to be a top 5 tight end.
All righty. Based on where you think they're all going to land in ADP, who is someone you're looking to target on this team and who's someone you're looking to avoid?
In terms of target, probably Devonta Smith. I think you'll eventually see. We saw it even last year. Like he out received AJ Brown in terms of total receptions. Yeah. So especially if you're in PPR leagues, that's going to have a ton of value. AJ Brown really is that big play guy. He's going to score a ton of touchdowns. Devonta Smith is going to be that truly consistent threat. So I think when you look at where his ADP lies, there's something to be said for that. It's a reliable wide receiver too, not just on his team, but also on your fantasy team. In terms of avoiding, I'll probably say Swift right now as we're doing the show
Too
in May.
expensive for too much.
Yeah,
too much
he really is
uncertainty.
too expensive. He's being drafted like he's going to be the number one guy, and I just don't see that happening. I think Penny is going to be the early down hammer in this offense. And if he gets hurt, or when he gets hurt, however you want to phrase it, I tend to
Right.
not try to predict injuries, but some people's history just kind of lends it easier.
Yeah.
But I mean, like even doing these projections, I have Penny at 137 rush attempts. I have Swift at 104. So, I think that they'll lean more on Penny. But again, if he ends up playing 11 games, that could very easily translate to 20 carries for Rashad Penny.
Think they win the division again? Yeah.
When I was looking at the schedule, I said at worst, I think this team is 9-8. Because I tend to play devil's advocate when I look at the schedule projections. We do on paper have the toughest schedule in the league. So I think that alone is going to call for some level of regression, especially when you're working in not one but two new coordinators on both offense and defense. So you're going to see some ups and downs in terms of that. When I first took my first glance at the schedule, I said through 10 games, I could very easily see this team being 5-5. And they have a very difficult stretch. I think it's from week 11 to 13 where they play San Fran, Buffalo, and Kansas City in 3 straight weeks. And I think I have that order flipped. So, They have a lot of really tough games against some really good fucking teams. And so, yeah, I mean, again, health will play into it. I don't think the lightning bottle can strike twice in terms of everybody playing 17 games again. And anytime you deal with injuries over the course of a season, you have to adjust on the fly. And that's going to make things difficult, especially when you're playing, 3 straight games against arguably the best teams in their respective divisions, even conference, maybe. So.
Absolutely. All right, Josh. Well, thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Aaron.
All righty, everyone. Once again, I'm Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist. This was my thoughts on the Philadelphia Eagles with Joshua Hudson. Thank you for joining the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again, Josh, for joining me, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a good day.
See you guys.